well. And thank you all for being here. I recognize some of you, and I have some old friends here, some colleagues from university who will remember me. And we have a special guest, it seems, Dr. Frial Ghazzoul, who has one of the first people to write about my work, and her review of the translator and color lights in Ahram is often cited by students and academics who wrote after her. So welcome to you all. I've got a PowerPoint, so I will share the screen and start the PowerPoint. There it is. Why is it not steering from the beginning? Okay, so here we are. Okay, so I'm starting with Jane Eyre, which, as you know, is a famous classic, and you don't need to be reminded of the plot. I'm sure. What happened was that in the 1960s and the 70s, the Arab cinema adapted a number of world classics, and these included Lady of the Camellias, Crime and Punishment, and The Picture of Dorian Gray. These adaptations were loose and adjusted to local conditions and references. In 1966, this adaptation was made in the Egyptian cinema under the title, This Man, I Love Him. And this is an adaptation of Jane Eyre. Oops, sorry, this is the wrong page. Okay, so in the adaptation, the plot followed the life of Sabrine, who's representing Jane. And Sabrine works for a wealthy landowner, Murad Bey, as a teacher for his young daughter. And then the film shows the mad woman, in the attic. Her name is Buthaina in the film, whereas in the novel she was called Bertha. And at the same time, the wedding is being prepared between Murad Bey and Sabrine. The Imam is invited to conduct the ceremony, and he announces that the marriage cannot take place. So in the original Jane Eyre, Jane reaches the church in order to marry Mr. Rochester, and then someone comes in and says, stop the marriage cannot take place because Mr. Rochester is married already to Bertha. So when they came to adapt this film for the Egyptian audience, how can they prevent the marriage from taking place? How can there be an obstacle? You can't have the Imam come and say, oh, Sabrine can't marry Murad Bey because he's already married, because this is a society where polygamy is acceptable. And therefore, such an obstacle cannot be, is not really an obstacle anymore. So what happens then? They come up with actually quite a clever or innovative idea. The Imam says, the marriage cannot take place. Murad cannot marry Sabrine because he's married to Buthaina, but it's not only that he's married to Buthaina, it's because Sabrine and Buthaina are actually sisters, even though they don't know that they are sisters. And Sharia law does not allow a man to marry sisters at the same time. So this combination of wives is not acceptable, and so the marriage cannot take place. And then the film then continues as the novel made, with the separation between the couple and them marrying at the end after the Bertha, or Buthaina in that case, dies. So the filmmakers in the 1968, they missed the opportunity of showing Egypt as a multi-faith society, if the family portrayed in the film were Christians, this would have been the best option for them to do. Then they would have not had to change the plot in such a drastic way. But they missed this opportunity, and they went ahead with a Muslim family for, catering for a predominantly Muslim audience. And so they had to change the plot. They could not follow what Charlotte Bronte had in mind, which is that Jane could not marry Mr. Rochester because his wife Bertha was alive, and because Jane is a practicing Christian, she refuses Rochester's proposal to live as his mistress, and she runs away. And only after Bertha's death do they become united. So this plot would not have been valid for the Muslim characters in this Hadar Rajul Ahibbo, and therefore they made this came up with this idea of Jane and Bertha being two sisters. They changed the plot in that way, and they invented this impediment to the polygamous solution of by having Sabreen and Buthaina be sisters unknown to each other. Jane Eyre is one of my favorite novels. I was taught Jane Eyre at school by actually an American nun, and she helped us as a class see the religious dimensions of the story. And as a Muslim reader reading Jane Eyre, I immediately reacted to the Jane Rochester dilemma myself by thinking, well, why can't he be married to both women? But the thing with fiction and what fiction does is that it allows you to enter another world. It allows you to enter the world of the story. And so even though the idea did flash through in my mind, well, why can't he marry both? I, of course, understood the context. I understood the society that Charlotte Bronte was describing. I sympathized completely with the character of Jane. I respected her choices, and I didn't expect anything else other than what the novelist gave us. So years later, then, when I came to write my own novel, and I was interested in or influenced by Jane Eyre being one of my favorite novels, I then wrote my own novel, which was The Translator. Okay, so in The Translator, when I was writing it, and I was thinking that I was writing a Muslim Jane Eyre that would be better than the film adaptation that was made. So and more like not really an adaptation, but something that would be like from the beginning, different from the beginning, but it's still inspired by Jane Eyre. So when the plot of The Translator is that it's about a Sudanese widow, and she works as a translator in a Scottish university, and slowly a relationship develops between her and Ray, who is a Middle East expert and for whom she translates texts from Arabic to English. And they fall in love, and they are faced with the obstacle of their different faith, in that I wanted them to get married, and Summer in the novel is portrayed as being a very typical or average Arab woman. She's attached to her religion, and so when it comes to marriage, she asks Ray to convert to Islam in order to marry her, and this is something that he finds difficult to do. So like Jane Eyre, Summer in The Translator does not want a relationship outside of marriage because of her faith. And I knew that this was, to me, this seemed to me very realistic, because I knew that the average Arab woman was devout, and that she was and moving to Britain would not really change her so much in that way. And I visualized the Samar as being, you know, the average girl next door, placed in this romantic predicament, and that she's confident in her faith, and that she's able to articulate her needs and to be assertive in that way. And in a way, I was also anticipating this as being a challenge for Muslim women growing up in the West, or for Muslim women as they move to the West. In previous generations, many of the Arab writers actually who moved to the West, Tayyib Saleh, Taha Hussein, they married Western women, and this was not a problem for them. It was because it's allowed in the religion. So in their personal life and in their fiction, they didn't tackle this problem, as far as I know. But I felt that this was a challenge that was going to be faced as more and more Muslim women move to the West, or grow, or are born in the West, or grow there. The novel is set in a pre-9/11 Britain in the years following the first Gulf War of 1991. This was the start of a raised consciousness amongst Muslim immigrants, and a need to define themselves. It was also a decade when there were concerns over radical Islam and terrorism, and this is reflected in the novel itself. There are references in the novel to the first Gulf War. There's references to the French ban on schoolgirls wearing the hijab, as well as the terrorist attacks on tourist buses in southern Egypt. And in the second part of the translator, it's set in Khartoum, and it shows the difficult economic circumstances that made someone like Samar and her husband have to leave Sudan in the first place, and also representing her as a woman who is working, as a woman from a new generation of independent young women who are, you know, living alone, working, sending back money home in order to support her son and her child. This is a photo of me and my family when very soon, at the time when I started writing. You can see my little son at the back. So I was 28 years old at the time. I was, you know, I started to write when I left Sudan. The idea of writing was the furthest thing from my mind. I was, you know, at that time, issues such as the dissolution, dilution, no, it's a dilution. At that time, issues such as dilution of identity and language, integration, the rights and wrongs, the gains and losses of leaving home occupied my thoughts. And around me, I could see other North African immigrants like myself. Many insisted that their stay in the UK was temporary, and yet their children were spending their entire childhood's formative years away from home. I watched the parents struggle to adapt to a new life, strive to benefit from it, while in the background, their children silently became less and less Arab, less and less Muslim, more and more a part of Britain. So these were the things that that led me to start writing, and these were the issues that I wrote about. Okay, this is a quote from Dubrieska Ogrysiak in her essay, "The Writer in Exile." And she says the writer tries to rationalize his personal nightmare in writing, to calm his exile's fears in writing, to put his broken life into some shape through writing, to order the chaos he has landed in through exile, to fix the insights he has come to in writing, to dilute his own bitterness in writing. And exile's writings are often nervous, subversive, and nostalgic. This is because exile in itself is a neurosis, a restless process of testing values and comparing worlds, the one we left and the one where we ended up. So in my case, the comparison was between Khartoum, which I left, and this is just a lovely photo I found once online, and it shows this couple, and they're looking over at the Nile. And there's so much in this picture that for me symbolizes Sudan and symbolizes all the things I miss, especially the figure of the woman in front, reminding me of my aunts and all the ladies that I miss in Sudan. And I like the details in the picture. I like the kind of cup of tea she's drinking and I can see it's tea with milk, and the sheets, the colorful sheets she has on the bed behind her, and this and how she's appreciating all the beauty that she's in the middle of, the view of the Nile and all that. So I'm very it's one of my favorite pictures, and it kind of represents to me what I miss about Sudan. And so this is kind of what was behind me, and this is the presence. Again, this is beautiful Scotland in the Highlands. It's misty, it's a little bit cold, but it's lonely. It doesn't have all the community and that was left behind. So this difference, this movement, it was something that fed my writing, and it was something that I was very suddenly wanting to express and to compare and to keep on writing about. And also the move, not just the movement in terms of place, but also of course the culture and the silence of the muezzin, the absence or at least the muteness of faith, and I found that I was I was as foreign as the new words in the English dictionary, Eid, Hajj, hijab, that they were listed in the new English dictionary. So this is something that I came to realize, and I came to express through my writing, as someone who reads in English and has been reading in English all my life. And it is that Eurocentric literature is also Christian-centric, no matter how writers and readers regard it as secular or humanist. Every genre, from crime to science fiction, is heavy with Christian symbolism, and even literary fiction, even when it is in opposition to Christianity, is also engaged with this ethos. So in literature, the European white Christian viewpoint is normal, and everyone and everything that is other than that must justify and explain. And in my case, though, if I'm writing from Muslim perspective, from within Islamic tradition, not all my characters are practicing Muslims, and many are cultural or secular Muslims. It's natural for me to write about them because they are people I know and I am in contact with. These are some of the books, my favorite books as a child, and I'm bringing them up because some African writers have spoken about how when they've read books in English as children growing up in Africa, they they found themselves, inhabiting worlds that was very different in terms of the food, in terms of the climate, in terms of the absence of Black children in the text that they were reading. So feeling that they were racially marginalized. And in my case as well, I was aware when I was reading as young that I was aware that I was a Muslim child, and that I was reading books about Christian children. And so, for example, in like any other African child, I would be amazed at the mention of strawberries in these novels, and wonder what they are, because I haven't tasted them. And also like the characters, and maybe some of you are thinking, well, if I'm half Egyptian, how come I never tasted strawberries? And this is because we only used to go to Egypt in the summer when it wasn't time for strawberries. And then also the characters in the children's books would eat like eggs and bacon, and I was always wondering what that was. And one of the first short stories I wrote was about, it was called Tuesday Lunch, and it was about an 8-year-old girl in London who behind her mother's back eats a pork pie at school. So she eats the pork pie at school, and her first response is that, oh, it tastes like chicken, what is the fuss about? And then when she, after a while, after a couple of hours, she's sick. And the story follows her feeling the excitement of breaking the rule, the curiosity, the buildup of the nausea afterwards, and her mother comes to collect her, and the child doesn't confess that she had eaten the pork pie. And the story ends with her feeling of purification as a result of the vomiting, and feeling close to her mother. But the story doesn't explain what the reason was that she was sick. Was it a guilt? Was it psychologically because she felt so guilty, or was it just a bad pork pie? And also, many of the people who read the story were surprised that the child doesn't confess to the mother at the end of the book, and gets absolved by the mother. They were expecting this. They're expecting that the child tells the mother, I did something wrong, and then the mother says to her, it's okay. But then again, you must remember that coming from a Muslim background where there is no culture of confession, then the story then would not really have an element of confession in it. And so the story ends with the girl keeping what she had done to herself, and the mother never knowing what the daughter has done. And so as I read in my childhood, I would on my own make kind of translations in my mind. So I'm reading about the attitude of, for example, the little women towards the Bible. But then I know that this is not really the same as the Quran, because we don't have, because they are not memorizing it, and I am, and they are, and there is no family. We wouldn't, they would say something like the family Bible, but we wouldn't say something like the family Quran. So it's things like that I, on my own, as a young reader, I was making these comments in my head, but I wasn't sharing them with anyone, because nobody really was asking or talking about these things. But it was these things that stayed with me then as I grew older and became a writer. And then the laws of inheritance are very interesting in Pride and Prejudice, of course, when you compare the laws of inheritance, and they had a very big impact on the plot of Pride and Prejudice with the laws of inheritance in Islam. That is also interesting. I was also sensitive, of course, about the Orientalist attitudes towards Islam, but not in these particular books, but later on as I grew older. This is Christina Phillips in her paper Reading Islam in the West, and she says canonical studies of the novel conceive it as a secular genre. Its emergence is typically explained in terms of a change in able to see this change in worldview away from God and towards the human and mundane, while literary establishments since the novel's inception have upheld an increasingly secular concept of literary value. As a result, religious belief has been more or less forced out of the contemporary canon. Literary texts may contain religious themes, characters, and imagery, but if they wish to be taken seriously by critics, these must be secularized. Her paper then goes on to investigate why my novels have found such a positive reception, and my response to that is that among Muslims, religious observance and faith are an integral part of day-to-day life. In a novel, we can enter their mind and read their thoughts and understand how different they are and similar. And therefore the people who are actually the men who crowd the mosques, the women who go on Hajj, I feel that they mustn't be excluded from fiction. If we exclude them from fiction, from literature, then we are excluding not just a matter of numbers, but we are excluding. It doesn't make sense to exclude them. And also at the same time, I don't agree that a novel should have a heavy religious lesson. Literary fiction should not be preachy. It should aim to educate and not inform. It should entertain and be truthful. I don't feel the need in my writing, and you won't find lots of verses from the Quran or the Hadith. I don't have lengthy paragraphs explaining concepts to the reader, nor are my characters role models. They are flawed and complex characters trying to, most of the time, they're trying to practice their faith or do the best in the circumstances. So this point of view of that the novel is a secular genre is also contradicted by many excellent novels in which faith plays a dominant role. I'm a huge fan of Marilyn Robinson's novels, and Gilead, and the latest one is Jack is also very beautiful, and she's got a series of novels. Also, Muriel Spark, Memento Mori, that's also a novel where faith really plays a very important part of it in the novel, very deeply actually. And this one also is well known, Thornton Wilder, the Bridge of St. Louis Ray. It's a beautiful novel. And Graham Greene, The End of the Affair, that's also very beautiful. It's got a beautiful line where the woman, when she becomes a Catholic, she says I caught faith like someone catches influenza. I remember that line. Sadly, the film adaptation, there's a new film adaptation of The End of the Affair where they took out all the religious elements in the novel, and it just became really very odd and very strange and very disappointing that they felt that they had to do that, and make such a huge change in order to make the film adaptation. So naturally, then I prefer a quote like that from Ivan Panin, Lectures on Russian Literature, where he says, the human soul ever strives to reveal itself in literature through its manifold changes and developing forms. The soul ever strives onwards and upwards, and whether the struggle be called progress of the species, looking for the ideal, or union with God, the thing is the same. It is of this journey of the soul heavenward that literature is the record, and the various chases of literary development in every nation are only so many mileposts on the road. So with regards, yeah. With regards to my own writing, I found that with time, as I lived longer in Britain and I started to feel more at ease, the characters experienced homesickness less and less, and they started to behave like citizens of the world in a way. And also I was able to build more complex situations using my own feelings of being away from home. In Minaret was my second novel, and it's about a young woman from a privileged background in Sudan finds herself exiled and reduced to working as a maid in London. And the novel was considered by critics as a breakthrough for the first time, showing the lives of Muslims in London, inside the mosque, etc. After that, with Lyrics Alley, it was set in 1950s Sudan, and here the characters that were in exile was a young man who through an accident becomes paraplegic, and so he's kind of exiled from his or he's lost his the way his life was going ahead. And there are also characters who are Egyptian living in Sudan in the 1950s, and so I use that as my kind of exile. The kindness of enemies was set between 19th century Russia and present day Scotland, and it dealt with issues of identity, and it dealt with the historical story of Imam Shamil, who kidnaps a Russian princess. And the novel also is like a commentary on the war on terror. And then with my short stories, this is when this includes some stories that I had written at the beginning of my career, and where there's a lot of feeling of alienation. But then some of the later stories, the characters are more feeling that they are citizens of the world. One of the lines in one of the short stories says, an immigrant is a parent who finds out too late that she's given up her child for adoption. And the story deals with the immigrant parents who imagine that their children are born with a hard drive of their memories about the motherland, but this is not the case. And that for second generation children, the new country is their one and only home, and they grow up influenced by the schools they go to and the culture surrounding them. It is as if they have been adopted by the surrounding society. From the parents' point of view, there is a sadness in not being able to see your child going through the same experience that you've been. The assumption, of course, is that being in the West, that in case of the immigrants who've moved to the West, they are in a better, more privileged space, but that can also be fraught with tension and issues such as racism and Islamophobia, which erode a child's sense of worth. This is my latest novel, which is Bird Summons. And in it, the characters are really quite settled in Britain, and the whole novel is about their connection to the land, their connection also with Christianity, and making Britain their home for sure. So the novel really is about a road trip to the Scottish Highlands, and it becomes a surreal spiritual journey in which objects take on subjective meanings. 3 women immigrants, one from Sudan, one from Egypt, and one from Syria. They experienced body transformations reflecting their specific dilemmas and challenges. On the shores of Loch Ness, the women stay in a monastery which has been converted into a resort. With each passing day, the resort becomes disturbing and then foreboding. What was once charming becomes smoky with menace. When the women attempt to accomplish their aim of visiting Lady Evelyn Cobbold's grave, they are weighed down by their own previous actions and fantasies, as well as restrictions imposed on them due to the stalking seasons. So they are going to visit the grave of this lady, who is Lady Evelyn Cobbold, born in 1867, and she died in 1963. And she was the first British woman to go on pilgrimage to Mecca. She has this amazing story in that she was an aristocrat. She was born in Cairo. She had this childhood in Algeria, where she was spent time with a nanny and the servants who were all Muslims, and she became attached to the azan, to hearing the azan. And later on, after she got married and after she, she's a very fashionable lady, and she goes shooting, as you can see a photo of her shooting the deer in her estate. And she has a townhouse in Mayfair, and she has this whole big estate in the Highlands. She just decides to become a Muslim all by herself, and she makes this pilgrimage to Mecca and comes back and writes about it. She wrote a book about it. So she's buried out there in this in the middle of nowhere in the Highlands, really. And these women are going. The novel describes how they want to go and visit her grave, and how they see her as being the mother of Scottish Islam, and that they want to kind of relate to her as a leader. And they are kind of influenced by her, or kind of inspired by her, and looking for inspiration. So I mean, readers will differ in what they take away from the story of my novel, depending on their own inclinations, whether they are moved by the spiritual dimensions in the book or not. But what I'm hoping for is that they will take the impression that Islam is not an alien presence in Britain, but instead something that is in harmony with nature, and a continuation of the Christianity practice in previous centuries. So the novel is a contemplation on the presence of Islam in Britain, how the process is coming from immigration, economic and refugee, as well as a colonial past, how Islam is a continuation of Christianity, how women are vital in this process, and how individual human flaws and weaknesses are shaping this narrative. What I interweaved in the novel are fables from Muslim literature, such as the mystic tales of Rumi, The Conference of the Bird by Fariduddin Attar, and there is the figure of the hoopoe bird in the Conference of the Birds, also makes a presence in the novel. And in the Conference of the Bird, he is the figure of the guide, and he performs the same role in Bird Summons through the fables he tells, and how he guides the women at the end of the novel when they become lost in the forest. So what I hope my books will do in the world, I suppose, if I put it into words, I would say that I hope that they provide a place of compassion, a place in which the traveler can share the baggage they carried with them, a place to hum the yearning for home, a space where the immigrant can push forward and claim a position in the new world, which might not be welcoming at first, but hopefully there are spots which can give way to the pressure of a stranger rather than resist. Because the immigrant experience is also often one of blunder and misunderstandings, I'm also looking for a forgiving place where people can be given a second chance. I guess my books are dishes I'm serving to the reader, offering offerings full of flavor with a moody texture and the chance shock of pepper. My characters are flawed rather than good, and so different readers respond to them in different ways, sometimes with impatience and sometimes with empathy. Either way, I hope that readers feel a mild jolt of consciousness. Practically speaking, we will not, in the course of our life, come into contact with every single person who's different from us. We will certainly come into contact with many, but not all. And that's why reading is so important, because realistically speaking, we will not go through every possible human experience. And many such experiences are universal, but not all. Harmony and cooperation between people who are culturally different is not only a good thing, but a necessary thing. We cannot do without it. The way the world today is interconnected, the mobility of people, our dependence on each other makes it necessary for us to be open-minded and flexible. To be insular and parochial in this day and age is to be on the wrong side of history. The writer Neil Gaiman says that fiction builds empathy and that reading is a way of looking out through the eyes of others. He says you get to feel things, visit places and worlds you would never otherwise know. You learn that everyone else out there is a me as well. You're being someone else. And when you return to your own world, you're going to be slightly changed. Empathy is a tool for building people into groups, for allowing us to function as more than self-obsessed individuals. And I think that reading does that, and reading, across cultures does that. And certainly, as someone who made such a move, I have, depended so much on the reading that I had done, and all the books that have that taught me, about the West and living in the West, and made it possible for me to make a home for myself here. So thank you very much for listening.